season 2011-12 was one of the most incredible seasons in the history of Scottish football, with the death of one of our largest clubs. The 10 seasons that followed were an amazing 10 years in the history of Celtic Football Club, with 4 consecutive trebles, one of which was an invincible treble. And it all ended with a worldwide pandemic that resulted in a worldwide lockdown. This is the fans' story and the fans' recollection of those incredible seasons. You can listen to it every week if you're a paid subscriber to theceltigunderground.substack.com. We hope you enjoy.
Music in my head, crazy music playing in the morning light. Oh, ho, ho, it's magic, you know.
So, we are now in the 7th season of the 10 in a row. Brendan Rodgers is still manager. Noticeable deaths in that season again. And actually, I missed her passing away last season because it was it was towards the end of the season and I was taking the notes. Tommy Gemmell passed away in the season before, in the March of the season before. For this season, noticeable deaths: Glenn Campbell, Jake LaMotta, Tom Petty, comedian Sean Hughes, David Cassidy, Keith Chegwin, Cyril Regis, Ken Dodd, Stephen Hawkins, Ray Wilkins, a very young Ray Wilkins, Eric Bristol and Aretha Franklin passed away. I'm sort of losing the will to live with number ones because I know none of them. It was the same number one when we started the Champions League campaign as it was when we started the league, and it was something by Louis Fonzi, Daddy Yankee and Justin Bieber. Never heard of it. Anyway, films were Star Wars, Last Jedi, Thor, Ragnarok, Justice League, Black Panther, and Avengers Infinity War. But it was quite a season for Celtic, as we'll see, with some changes in and out, and the first inklings, in my impression, the first inklings of Brendan being a bit frustrated with our signing policy. So we'll start, as we always do, with Champions League qualifiers. Saint, you'll remember this. We were away at Linfield. We won 2-0 away at Linfield and then won 4-0 at Celtic Park. Then we had Rosenborg, which was really tight. We drew 0-0 at Celtic Park and then won 1-0 away with James Forrest scoring, and then Astana 5-0 at Celtic Park. So it was all comfortable. But for a very brief moment away in Astana, it starts to get a wee bit nervy. But we eventually win 4-3, 8-4 on aggregate. So say, do you want to take us through the Champions League qualifying then? Linfield, Rosenborg, Astana.
Linfield was always going to be a tough one for the club, given the political surroundings. But I think what it indicated was that Northern Ireland was a changed place, because the idea of Celtic playing in Linfield in the 70s and the 80s, right into the 1990s, would just have been ludicrous. It could never have happened. And I think Celtic misjudged it a wee bit, because the Irish fans, especially the Northern Irish fans, who we've got a fanatical fan base in Northern Ireland who are really, really faithful to the club through decades. And Celtic refused to take tickets originally, which I thought was a bad call. And they did change their mind in the end, and everything went off, okay. So that was off the park. On the park, it was academic. Linfield, to be honest, weren't very good. Moving on to Rosenborg, that was a different kettle of fish entirely. I remember getting out the home game thinking, it's not looking great. They're a really well-drilled team. We found it really hard to break them down. And Andrew, you'll probably know this. Who was a left back? The wee blonde left back was a smashing player. He played against us 2 or 3 times. He was really impressive. And I remember thinking at the time that he'd have been worth buying. So in the away leg, I think Celtic deserved to win in the away leg. I think Rosenborg didn't know whether to twist their stick. And once we scored, with the away goals rule at that time, once we scored and went ahead, I don't think there was any danger of losing. But the really interesting one is the Astana one, because the home game, it was played in August, obviously. And I would describe the weather that night as being like December. It was a horrible night. It was wind, it was rain, it was cold. And I remember kidding on with my son after that game and thinking, I think the weather was in our favour, because the Astana players probably in a warm climate aren't used to playing in that, and obviously we are, and we blew them away. Louis Griffiths was wonderful that night. He had a smashing game. And then moving on to the second leg, I don't even know how to describe that. It was crazy. We scored first, and everything looked fine. And then the wheels just fell off the bus. And at one point, seriously, I think if they got another goal, we were looking at elimination. I think he went to 4-1 at one point. And defensively, we were shocking that night. We were all over the place. But the thing about these qualifiers as well, Noah, is it's the feeling of relief that you get when you eventually get through into the group stages. So it then justifies the mean.
Andrew, I felt Hapoel Tel Aviv the season before, and then Astana this season. Astana were 5-0 up in the first leg, and as Stephen says, we get to a point where we're 4-1 down away from home, and suddenly it's looking a bit risky. Demonstrated these were teams that we were better than, and we would get through, but it demonstrated the nerves within the club over Champions League qualifying. That it was as much a mental issue. Do you agree?
Yep. Do you remember? Well, oh God, it was a couple of years after. Sorry, I'm getting my timelines mixed up because of the two spells for Lennon. But 2 years after this was when Dermot Desmond made his famous statement about hiring a psychologist before these. Do you remember before Champions League qualifiers? Because there was a mental block in the Celtic players. It was after they lost to Ferencváros 2 seasons on. But obviously, this was kind of things that were going on inside the club, thinking that there's something beyond, even as we've talked about before, beyond the manager, beyond the tactics, beyond the personnel. There's some kind of mental blockage when it comes to Celtic. We've talked about it as well because it's so much of the season goes into these qualifiers, especially now for Celtic in the sense of they're so dominant. It's like the whole season is framed by what happens in these 4, 6, 2 games. And that's when you're pouring so much into that. Like, I think that can almost have a sensory overload for the players. And there definitely feels like that in some of these kind of second away legs. But I will say, you know what I do remember about it? One of my best ever performance stories, they used to ask me to kind of guess the draws. It was the most, it was like you had to try and say, who is it you can possibly get? In the first round draw, you're looking at it and think, what? So what I do is I mentally think, right, they were kind of regionalise it then. So then you think, right, it'll be certain Scandinavian teams. There's always a chance of a Welsh team or an Irish team. Linfield. And if you remember, the game should have been played on July the 12th. It was played on a Friday night.
That's right.
To avoid being played when it should have been played. It was Celtic playing Linfield on July the 12th. And I thought, that's a great one. Because it was so soul-destroying writing these pieces about teams I knew nothing about, but teams that nobody cared about, to be honest with you, the Slovenian champions or something like that. So I thought, I'll go on about how Celtic could be playing in Belfast against Linfield on July the 12th. It just went nuts. It went nuts. And more to the point, when the draw came out, actually, I guessed the draw, right? I got over 100,000 views for that piece. 150,000 views. I think it was the second best performance piece I ever had. So that's my memory. But my other memory is wee James Forrest coming to the rescue against Rosenborg, the second leg. Because, again, astute management from Rodgers, because he recognised there was a crisis in terms of the strikers, and he recognised that he could play Forrest through the middle, and Forrest, he delivered by scoring the clinching goal, because a lot of people thought that was Celtic gone after, I think the first leg was 0-0, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought, there's no way Celtic will keep a clean sheet. There's no way they'll go there and win. And they did it. That was a big night. That was a big night because genuinely the odds weren't favoured. Celtic weren't favoured. Both the odds and both the kind of feeling around the camp. Most people expected Celtic to go out that night. I think the player you're talking about, Stevie, was Melling. I think Celtic later
Oh,
were
yeah.
credited with a
Good
bid
player.
for him, weren't they?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was terrific.
Is he
Very-
not the guy that's been playing left back for Denmark for the last few years?
Is it the same guy, Nick? No?
Played in the Euros. Johan
Is he-
Melly, is it? No.
Don't
Melling.
know, but your point about the forwards is right. I mean, I think Dembele and Griffiths were both out. I think injured and suspended or something like that. Because did Griffiths not pick up a suspension for tying the? Did he
Yes.
tie a Celtic scarf to the post at Linfield, and also somebody chucked a bottle of a Buckfast at him when he picked it up and pretended to drink from it?
He did,
And he
he
got
did.
booked
That's
for it.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
And then
Griffiths
did he get a
with,
second booking for putting the flag, the scarf on the post or something?
He
Yeah,
did.
that's
He
right.
did.
And I think Griffiths was
Not for the last time
suspended,
this
I think,
season.
for the-
Not for the last time this season, eh?
Yes.
Tying a scarf.
Yeah, he was suspended, I think, for the first Rosenborg game, and Dembele was injured, which is why I think in the first game Rogic played at centre forward, which just did not work at all in the game that finished 0-0. And Jamesy played through the middle, played as a striker in the game in Trondheim. So, but I mean, one of the other issues I think about the campaign, as we talked about last season, was the centre half pairings. And let me just give you some information here. So Rosenborg at home, it was Ayer and Jozo Siminovic. In the away game, it was Eric and Jozo. But Eric got injured, and this was the first time we saw Near Beton play a centre back. And as we go through the whole European campaign, and this was the wee bit of research I did, we had 9 different centre back pairings over the course of the Europa League plus the 12 games we played in the Champions League. You know, there was Boyata, there was Lustig playing there, and it was just chopping and changing. You know, Ayer was new to the position, and Beaton was new to the position. And when you talk about the shambles in Astana, in the second game, it was Ayer and Beaton together. And my memory of that, and I can't even remember where I watched it, but you know, it was on television somewhere, but you know, we were 4-1 down 69 minutes, and then they hit the bar. And then Thornton made a magnificent save, and we were all over the place before we got our 2 goals late on. And it was but the goals, some of the goals were amazing as well. You know, and I think Astana, you know, they weren't great, but against a poor defence like we had, they definitely had a chance, and they gave us an almighty scare. But but that was us throughout the group stages again, which was the main objective.
Yeah, so we got through to the group stages, and we'll go over those later because the league campaign kicked off. We were continuing our unbeaten run, so the league campaign kicked off with a 4-1 home victory against Hearts. We then went to Thistle and won, Kilmarnock and won. Then we drew at home to St Johnstone, then thumped Hamilton away, Ross County at home, and then went to Ibrox and won. So, Robert, any memories of those first batch of games, particularly the victory at Ibrox with Rogic and Griffiths getting the 2 goals?
I don't remember much about them. I remember watching the Hearts game, the opening game of the season, because I was in Orlando with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I got up at whatever time was required in the morning to watch that game. The game at Ibrox was, we'd won twice at Ibrox the previous season, and I remember it was quite a stuffy game. I watched it at somebody's house in Hong Kong, and what would have been a Saturday night for us over there. And, you know, again, Rogic, so often the case, he comes up with the goods, he put one in the roof of the net. I think we were already into the second half in that game. The better team, but we hadn't broken through. And I do remember a great finish by Griffiths, lovely pass by Patrick Roberts to put Griffiths in behind the defence, and he finished it with his right foot. And, so that was another good win for us. I think Rangers had Pedro this time. And the other game I remember from around this spell was the week after the Old Firm game where John McGinn scored 2 fabulous range goals against us, and Callum McGregor replied with 2 for us, and it was a terrific game, and it was the first time I'd really noticed John McGinn, and it was obviously no surprise that we tried to sign him at the end of the season, about which maybe more later.
Yeah.
But I think it was a steady start to the season, but not spectacular. And of course, we were carrying forward our long unbeaten run. And, so after this bunch of games, I don't know what we're up to, 55 or approaching 60 domestic games unbeaten under Rodgers. I think by the time we'd got through the end of September.
So Saint, we finally lost our unbeaten run on the 17th of December, 4-0. I mean, it was quite a way to lose it. But we we'd had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 draws prior to that. And in fact, 3 of those 5 draws have been at Celtic Park. And also, it was quite funny, quite odd. Brendan Rodgers in his first spell struggled to do anything against Hibs, yet was beating Rangers every single time we played them. So right up to and including the Hearts game where we lost, do you have any of those games that's particularly stick in the mind?
The one that sticks in my mind is that it was a Wednesday night game at Pittodrie, and Aberdeen were going well at the time. I think we alluded to that last week, given the fact that in Scottish terms, McInnes was building a good team. And Aberdeen were that way that they'd finished second. They saw themselves as better than Rangers, but not quite as good as we were. So this game at Pittodrie, I remember feeling a wee bit apprehensive about that, actually, because I thought, this is a really difficult match. We blew them away that night. I think it was one of the strongest performances from any Rodgers team throughout. And what I remember of it was the fact that Kieran Tierney was hitting his peak. He was unbelievably good that night. I'm sure he scored a goal, and I think there was another one he put a cross in for Dembele at the back post. And my recollection is that this boy is developing into such a good player. He had pace. He was strong in the tackle. He was great at attacking, and unusually for a fullback, he could deliver a good cross. A lot of fullbacks are good in the sense that they get forward, but they've no final ball. And Tierney had everything. He was almost the perfect fullback at that time. So the one thing I think was a hindrance was exactly what you've been saying there. You've won 50 odd games, and it becomes like a noose on your neck, because everybody's when every game comes out, this is it. Well, we must lose at some point. This is going to be it. This is going to be it. And we should really have lost it. It was Easter Road. We were 2-0 down, and we fought back to get a 2 each draw. Yep. And I remember thinking at the time, it would be a bad thing to get that game out the road if we'd lost, because it resets the record, and you don't have this hanging over you all the time. But one other wee thing just worth mentioning, Scott Sinclair was absolutely sensational the season before, and there was wee signs that I don't know what it was, he just didn't seem to be the same player in the subsequent seasons. He went to being this player who was full of confidence and scoring goals, and by the stage of our discussion, coming up to the Christmas New Year period, Scott Sinclair just didn't strike me as being the same player as what he'd been.
Well, touching on that, Andrew, my thought towards the end of this season, looking back in the season, is that this was in the period when we started to play, all of a sudden started to play much more static football.
Yeah, I was just
Brendan.
These are the two elements I was going to pick up.
When I look back at it, we played better football when one of Brown or Ncham wasn't playing. And I always felt the problem was there was 2 players whose default position was to play the sideway pass and not the through ball. And that was starting to cause a problem for Scott Sinclair not being the player that he'd been, because we weren't playing the balls early enough to him. And it was those 2 in particular it was a lot of sideway with lack of then lateral movement, because the way that Rodgers had got Brown playing so well was he basically drawn a square in the middle of the pitch and said, this is the place that you play in and you don't play anywhere else outside it. And that's how he turned from being a player that everybody said was finished under Ronnie to everybody saying was fantastic under Brendan. It's because he just played in this box, this square bit that was just outside our penalty area and just the other side of the halfway line and not and outside the centre circle width. So yeah, we go through anything that sticks in your mind through to obviously you can then chat about our 4-0 defeat at Tynecastle.
Well, just the 2 points that you guys brought up there, I was going to bring up Scott Sinclair, because we actually remember speaking to him and it was as if he was devoid of confidence. And what he said to us, he says, everybody's doubling up on me now. We got him quite early in the seasons, kind of what's happened to your form. When you look at it, actually, he was still contributing goals, but just the performances weren't there. And he said, I'm doing the same things. Everybody's just doubling up on me. And so it's much harder for me to make the same impact. He was almost trying to find excuses in his own mind for knowing that things hadn't just... Apparently, his confidence right throughout his career was always quite fragile. And you saw that. I think you saw that. And he maybe thought to himself, how do I top this? I mean, we were all thinking this. I think there was a hangover from the Invincible season, as there inevitably would be, because you thought, you can't do that again. You're not doing that again. It's just not going to happen. But it was incredible to drop off, just if I can speak in a more general term, because I think it's significant. 24 points they dropped off from the previous season, 24 points. But not only that, so they had an 80, I think it was an 82 points haul. And that is the second lowest points haul for any Celtic League Championship winners this century. And that's how bad it was. We were back to, in terms of outcomes, we were back to Ronnie, we were back to the Neil Lennon seasons where there was no real challenge. And maybe because subconsciously there was that as well, because there was no real challenge coming from across the city, and Aberdeen weren't quite what they'd been in the previous maybe 2 seasons or so, you would say.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm being unfair to Aberdeen, if anybody. But that, I was at our Christmas, we always had a Christmas family lunch, with our extended family, because I was one of 34 cousins. Some of them aren't here anymore, but so that was our Christmas lunch, and it's so many times it's been a horrible result for Celtic, because I remember they lost 3-2 at Inverness one day, and then we were watching this coming in, the 4-0, and it was almost like, if you're going to go down in a ball of fire. It was like, remember, but this was the time where there was a complaint about the length of the grass. Remember there was a kind of spat over the length of the grass at Tynecastle, but I don't know if this is the one that. But what I did like, and obviously he does certain things it's all about, he's read all these books about how you manage people, the psychology of being a manager. Remember, he gathered them all in the centre circle after it. He gathered the players to thank them, as opposed to going through them for how bad they were.
Yeah.
He gathered them all together, very kind of visually and obviously. Like, remember that Phil guy? What was the guy who done it at Hull, which didn't work quite the same way? Phil, what was his name?
Phil Brown.
Phil Brown, aye. It was a bit better than the Phil Brown version. But so when he said, and that's all his post-match was all about, let's just celebrate what an achievement it was. 69 games. Never been done.
I think one of the factors, sorry to interrupt, I think one of the factors in this second season for Rodgers is that the league was a bit harder this year. And when I say that, you had Ian Cathro got fired by Hearts at the start of the season, and you got the experience of Levine coming in. You had Lennon at Hibs. Steve Clark took over as Kilmarnock manager in October, turned them around in a top 6 team. There was always difficult games quite often against Tommy Wright's teams at South St Johnstone, and Robinson starting to make a name for himself at Motherwell. And so I think a lot of the games just were tougher. You mentioned there was a lot of draws. we only won 11 of our 19 home games in the league. And, of the 12 league games we played against Hibs, Motherwell and Kilmarnock, we only won 3. So teams were getting the measure of us. There was a lot of draws. There was a lot of 0-0s. I thought the goals started to dry up. As you said, Sinclair, I think after Christmas, he wasn't contributing so much for the reasons you've said, Andrew. I think Musa also wasn't contributing, and, Eddie was new on the scene, but, we just didn't seem to be, battering teams and scoring enough goals. And, we could do it against Rangers. And, my stat from discussing last week about which team did we score most goals against, and it was Rangers. My stat for this season is the exact same. Which team did we score most goals against? And it was Rangers again, 14 goals against Rangers this season. So I just think it was a more defensive league. Teams were a bit better organised because there was some very experienced managers around that, maybe made it harder for us to play. Maybe there was also issues with our own game and our own tactics, but I think that was part of the explanation.
So saying after the defeat at Tynecastle, we actually, I was just checking up, of the next 7 games, 6 were in Glasgow. And 5 of them were at home and 2 were away. So away to Thistle and away at Dundee and all the others. So in terms of once you've lost the run, if you're going to lose the run, having then a run of games where you don't even leave Glasgow is probably the best thing to happen to you, so you can consolidate it. So we beat Thistle, Aberdeen, we Dundee on the road, and then we draw with Rangers at Celtic Park. And then we have the winter break. So any memories of those games after the Tynecastle defeat and then the draw with Rangers at New Year?
The draw with Rangers at New Year, they should probably have won that. They had great chances, especially in the second half. And it was the first time that I actually thought to myself, something not right here. You know what I mean? Like we played and mainly played well in the league, even though we were drawing the odd game. But I remember watching them that day and thinking, sometimes it's really hard to put your finger on what's wrong with a team. It could be confidence, it could be the balance of the selection, it could be the tactics. And I just remember thinking at that time, after what we enjoyed the season previous, but it was a joy to watch, it was becoming quite tedious, especially at Celtic Park, when we were finding it harder and harder to break teams down. And we didn't seem to have a plan B. And I was becoming quite critical of Brendan at that point because I felt that we were stagnating, and probably he's thinking to himself, they're not giving me the money to go out and buy the players that I need. So it was the first time during his tenure that I actually thought, we've got problems here, not tremendous problems, but just the feeling that things aren't quite right. And that Rangers game in particular, Craig Gordon made a great save, and I think Ayer had a brilliant goal line clearance where it was miraculous, and he managed to keep the ball out. And I think it gave Rangers false hope, actually, because at that point they were thinking they're on the right track, and as we'll discuss later on, they weren't on the right track, and ultimately they had to change their manager. But no, it was a poor period. We were definitely not playing well.
Was Pedro gone by then for that 0-0 game on the 30th of December? Was it Murty?
That's
it was Murty
interesting.
again, aye. Because Murty, that was his second draw at Celtic Park, if you remember, because he'd come in and been caretaker previously. And I think he was given the job to the end of the season, kind of on the basis of, but he didn't quite make it. He didn't make the end of the season.
First game I noticed Alfredo Morelos and his tendency over the years to have spectacular misses against us. And you mentioned, Gordon made a fantastic reflex save from a Morelos header from point blank range. But then he had another one which was just as easy, and he put it past the post. These were glaring misses, and it was to become a feature pretty much for Morelos, apart from the COVID season when he did get a couple of goals against us. So, he became an important part of the Celtic story, I think, over a few seasons. So, but I hadn't really noticed them until that game. But you're right, Rangers could easily have won that game. And I think they were in decent form at that time after Murty had taken over. I think they'd won away at Hearts and Aberdeen. So, but yeah, we weren't playing that well.
No, but despite not playing that well, so that's the sort of winter break. We'd already secured, and Brendan Rodgers had become the first ever Celtic manager to do this. He'd won the 4th of 4 trophies that he'd played for, and that we had the League Cup, beat Kilmarnock 5-0 at home, beat Dundee 4-0 away. He then managed to get a result in at Easter Road, which has never been his great ground. Where we beat
that was it.
Hampden.
Oh, was it Hampden? That's right.
Hampden,
That's
that's
right.
the
Yeah, so it
semi-final.
was at Hampden, so he didn't go Easter Road. Yeah, so it was a
He
Hampden
never won it.
semi-final 4-2.
He never won at Easter Road in his first spell.
First
That
spell, that was it.
The 2 grounds he never won at were Easter Road, and can anybody name the other one he didn't win it in his first spell?
Mm-hmm.
The only 2 Scottish grounds he managed that didn't win it.
Rugby Park, no?
No, he did win at Rugby Park.
No, he did, yeah.
Just a couple of weeks before he left, he won at Rugby Park.
Yes, the Scott Brown one. Yeah.
What was the other
But
one
there
then?
was one other ground he didn't win it.
Was it
for
was
a
this the
kind
day
of
with the cup?
for a kind
No.
of odd reason, not an odd reason, but
Yeah.
kind of an explainable reason of sorts.
On you.
St Mirren Park, because I think he only played one game, and that was this is to come next season. I think it was that when Cham gets sent off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Friday night game.
we end up beating Motherwell 2-0 in the League Cup final. Second time, first of 2 times we played Motherwell in cup finals this season. So Andrew, the League Cup run, anything particular about that stood out for you?
I remember the semi-final for Lustig's double. You know, he always kind of had a kind of
Yes.
odd, kind of wee, kind of scoring burst at certain odd occasions, and it was a great. It was we expected to. It was Neil Lennon thought, he could maybe do a number on Celtic here, but Celtic really kind of blew them away. I know it went back. I know it went back to 2-1, but then it was some Dembele got a double as well. So that's what I remember about it. And I remember it was a pretty efficient. By I hope my memory's not playing tricks on me, but the Motherwell victory in the final was pretty efficient. That's when Forrest became the first player. He scored the opener just after half time. That's when he became the first player since Bobby Lennox, Celtic player, to score in 3 League Cup finals.
Interesting. I remember I had a business trip home to the UK at the end of November, and I thought I can stretch it out a wee bit. I think I got about 8 days in Glasgow, and I saw us play Motherwell 3 times. That was it. It
Oh,
was a bit
yeah.
disappointing.
Oh, yeah.
And
Motherwell were actually
there was a midweek
that's right.
game at Fir Park where we nearly lost the unbeaten record when
That's
Lustig
right.
scored an own goal near the end, and then we got a penalty. Must have been 92nd minute, which Sinclair put it in the roof of the net, and so yeah, that was my football for that trip, was 3 games against Motherwell. But
Sinclair was booed, if you remember. He was booed because by the Motherwell fans, and that was the other element of that, about the kind of furore over
for the League Cup final, yeah,
the League Cup final over the penalty, and then it happened again, kind of thing. But there was all the stuff about, was he touched, wasn't he touched? Can't remember who the Motherwell player was, but that went on for
Petra.
days, didn't it?
Cedric.
Oh, right.
He got a
Yes,
red card. He got a red card for what looked like minimal contact on Sinclair.
Yeah, it was one of the ones you're touched and you go down, rather than you're touched that sends you down. It was you feel the touch, you go down.
I think
Let's be
the good
honest about
feeling,
it.
the good feeling about that League Cup final was there was no a good feeling about going to Hampden. About when Lennon and Dyler were there. We were losing games, quite frankly, we should have been winning. And some of them were quite embarrassing. We've already spoke about them in previous editions. And now there was this super confidence about him. I remember going to Hampden that day thinking, we'll win this. No way we're going to lose this. because you just had that thing about uh, although the team weren't playing as well as they had done previously, when it came to the big games, Rodgers was always a great motivator. He was always found a way of getting a result at domestic level, at least. And I just remember thinking that day, that it was never going to be easy, and Motherwell made it a hard game. But there was just this super confidence amongst the supporters now that we're winning this. No way we're losing this.
And Hampden games became events again because the crowds were really kind of getting ramped up. Celtic were selling out their allocations. I think actually in the semi-final, it was just under 40,000 was there, but it would have been much more. But Hibs spat the dummy and said, no, we want so many, such a percentage of the allocation, and then they couldn't sell it. And I think that's when it was kind of introduced that you guys aren't getting these to leave empty seats when other people want to go to the game, kind of thing. So that was
also the way that they gave tickets to those clubs to sell also changed, because what happened was they just gave Hibs the amount, and Hibs started selling from level. Yeah. So the way Hibs started selling it, they couldn't then give the tickets back to Celtic because the gap was in the middle of the Rangers. They had south stand sales and north stand sales, and then in the Rangers end was where the gaps were. So they then started saying, right, you can have these tickets, but we're going to start where you start at the Rangers end, and it's only if you start to sell out your tickets that you can get round to the north stand, so that we can then give these over to Celtic, and if it's Rangers into Rangers. Of course, that then becomes I do have a bit of sympathy for supporters of someone like Hibs. So if you're a Keane fan, you buy in the crappiest stand in Glasgow at the back of the Rangers end, and then if other people buy, if other diehards buy in, then it's the people at the end who don't go every week who are the ones who then get to be able to buy the tickets for the decent seats. They should go there.
It is quite a conundrum, but it's partly through the fact that Hampden's a terrible stadium for spectators,
Yeah. So we secured the League Cup, 4th trophy in 4 seasons, and at the same time as that, we have our Champions League campaign, which is really peculiar in that previous season we'd lost 3 and drawn 3, so there was 3 games that we'd got results, 2 of which were on the road. 2 of the results were on the road. And so you're thinking, right, okay, we'll go into next year's Champions League, we'll have learned a lesson, so we might be a bit better. And we get thumped at Celtic Park, but then we get a result on the road again, beating Anderlecht 3-0. And then we lose every other game, but miraculously managed, because we beat Anderlecht in the head-to-head, we managed to go through to the Europa League because we finished third. Because there was 2 teams got a whipping in every game, us and Anderlecht, so it came to our head-to-heads against each other. So, Robert, have you got any memories of the Champions League campaign where we won 1 game but managed to finish third in the group?
Well, I mean, I'm sure Brendan Rodgers, he's the sort of guy that sets objectives at the start of every season. And, how do you top the Invincible season when we'd also shown a bit of promise in the European games? And I'm sure, his target was, let's be in Europe after Christmas. But, after getting Barcelona and Man City and Mönchengladbach the season before, to then get PSG and Bayern Munich was a bit of a kick in the chops, quite honestly. And, the previous season we've got Neymar, Messi and Suarez, which is like the best front 3 I've ever seen. And this season it's Neymar, Cavani and Mbappe, which is the most expensive front 3 of all time in football. So, Rodgers was either going to have to change his game tactically and pack the midfield and really backs to the wall stuff, the sort of thing Lennon did against Barcelona a few seasons earlier. So we were just up against such incredible quality. I think the PSG game at home, I remember Tony Ralston, a very young Tony Ralston, was playing it right back. And at one point he went on a marauding run for about 50 yards, riding a few tackles, and he was trying to get the crowd up. But we were out first, and to lose 5-0 at home, I think, is unacceptable, even against that level of quality. But some of the elite teams in Europe were doing that to better teams than us. You know, they were doing it to English teams as well. So the win in Brussels was fantastic because it just gave us hope. Great goal by Griffiths early on when Tierney marauding down, you know, the left wing, and what Saint said earlier, Tierney absolutely at the top of his game in this particular season. And then I thought the two games against Bayern Munich, pretty spirited performances by us in both games. But, you know, Bayern Munich had half the German team that had won the World Cup a couple of years earlier. They had Robert Lewandowski, they had Arjen Robben, they had Kingsley Coman. They had an all-star team. And I think the big disappointment was Parkhead game. So this would have been match day 4 against Bayern when we did get back to 1-1 when Callum McGregor scored a terrific goal. Not long to go, 15 minutes to go, something like that. And then we lost a simple header, a cross into the box. Their midfield player, Javi Martinez, gets up, nods it in from very close range. Goalkeeper didn't come, centre-backs didn't defend. And, you know, going back to what I was talking about earlier, I think if we'd had a settled centre-back pairing all of that season, you know, you might have done a bit better in Europe. I think 2 of the Bayern goals in Munich, I think, were also just from crosses in the box. I mean, even Kimmich, who's not that big, scored with a header from about 15 yards out. So I think we should have done better. The left side about PSG away, the better. You know, apart from the fact we did lead briefly for about 5 minutes. And then Anderlecht at home, the game I was at, I thought massively disappointing performance. But I think we went into that game knowing that if we lost by less than 3-0, we were going through. Yeah. We were going to be in Europe after Christmas in the Europa League. And maybe that had some bearing on tactics. But as I recall, we didn't create much that night. And it was a quite unfortunate own goal by Jozo that won the game on the night for the Belgians.
And this was also around this time. This was when Brendan Rodgers said 2 things that I thought were pretty clear. He was talking about something you mentioned earlier, Andrew, about the mentality of it. He mentioned that when he felt part of our problem, the reason why we got so uptight about the qualifiers and why we were so poor in the Champions League is because our target was, and our stated target was to get to the Champions League. And he said that it was almost like the whole mentality of the club once we won, the qualifiers were so uptight. And then once we qualified, it was almost as if the mentality of the club was, well, we've achieved it. We've done what we planned to do, and we're in the Champions League. So that the whole mentality was different playing in the Champions League because we'd achieved our target. And secondly, it was when he mentioned that whenever we lost goals, we lost them in pairs. That if we lost one goal, we would lose another goal quickly after. And that was particularly prevalent. You mentioned also, Robert, about the Bayern Munich game. I always felt the players got carried away with the crowd that night. And when we equalised against Bayern, it was like we were playing 1 at the back and 9 up front, you know. It was like
a great goal.
Stuff.
It was a great goal, that. It was a terrific goal. It was one of Celtic's best.
Goal,
best team goals, was it?
Forest. I think a Forest pass,
Yeah, but I think it was worked all the way along.
Well,
I mean, there was embarrassment after embarrassment, but like it has to be said, the little kind of memories you have. I had to write a piece about you know, you pick somebody out to write about before the game, then you hope to do something. Sometimes I've had to change it because there's nothing to say about them. But that night was about Ralston coming up against, you know, as you say, the most expensive forward line in history. And I think my intro was something like, you know, it's like it reminded you of kind of one of those war films when they say, we want you to go on a mission behind enemy lines, you know. You're not coming back, but, you know, just like, just, you know, do yourself and your badge proud, you know, kind of thing. And there was an element of that. And I remember being really quite mortified because he made some crazy tackle on Neymar and he went right into his face, you know, right in his face, you know, with a fist up right in his face, get it right up, you kind of thing. You think, my God, your team's about 4-0 down by this point. You know, you don't try to kind of play the big shot when you're getting your arse handed to you. You know, you really shouldn't be doing that. And then I always remember that was one of the first times Rodgers out in Munich, and he was kind of doing a bit of deflections. Just want to say, he said, "Can I make a point here?" You know, broken off. He talking about the game. He said, "Just want to say how great our supporters were tonight." And they'd been going through the songbook, and there'd been some real. I said, "As long as you weren't listening to them too closely." And he went, and it was in a corridor. It was a corridor. We weren't even in the press room. It was in a corridor. They put you in this big corridor at the side so as he could get away quickly, you know, for the bus. And he went, "What?" And I said, "Well, as long as you weren't listening to them too closely, did you hear what they were singing?" You know, and they gave you that kind of withering look kind of thing, you know, like he would never necessarily be nasty to you, but like, because I just thought, I can't let this ride about, oh, how great the supporters were and all that. We'd been walking, me and my friend had been walking down the main street about 3 a.m. And obviously we weren't talking to each other because we'd just been a kebab shop or something like that, but these Celtic supporters who were walking the other way just started to abuse us and abuse us and abuse us. And they didn't know. I mean, I don't know if it'd make any difference if they did know that we were Scottish, but it was just this kind of level of abuse. You were beginning to see that in away trips, just people really knowing how to behave, just with any kind of common decency. There was a lot more of it. I'd been seeing it forever with Rangers, but I hadn't quite seen the same. And they became fewer points of difference when you were kind of dealing with away supports because of certain elements within our support. That's the reality of it. I know people might not like to hear that kind of thing, but that's my lived reality.
So you were going to say, Robert?
I was just going to say
Sorry, Robert, I didn't mean to.
No. So, I was at a dinner at Parkhead around this time. I think it must have been before Christmas 2017, and Brendan Rodgers spoke, and he was asked about some of the heavy defeats that Hastings we'd taken in Europe in this season and the one before at the new camp, and he talked about the problems with the resilience of the players after the third goal goes in, and he felt the fight went out of the players, the heads dropped, the shoulders dropped. You know, we're still battling away, giving it everything at 2-0, and then once that third goal goes in, as happened on a number of these fixtures, he felt that, you know, we didn't give up, but, you know, there was a mental reaction which the players
slump. You just slump.
You know,
there's
the
just a
game's
kind
out of reach. You know, 2-0 down, you're always in with a shout, and when it goes to 3, and then as you said, losing goals in pairs, 3 becomes 4 pretty quickly, and you know, a lot of late goals where, you know, a 3-0 defeat against PSG at Parkhead becomes a 5-0 defeat. Mm-hmm. You know, the optics are obviously terrible, you know, as well as the reality being terrible. I'm not sure actually if we've solved that resilience problem in the last couple of seasons.
Well, we'll find
no,
out.
But they might get there. They might get there, but that's and this is what started with the Champions League. It started to become to Celtic, who were just complete also-rans. The previous campaign was the first one that Celtic hadn't won a game in, and this campaign was the first one they'd lost all 3 home games in. So these were the kind of, Rodgers is okay as a flat-track bully because of what he does domestically, but look what happens when they go up a level. But it really did. I mean, he was unlucky in the sense of the group opponents he was getting. I mean, he was really getting the creme de la creme.
Yeah.
And interestingly, though, you know, neither Bayern nor PSG went on in the tournament, but Real Madrid knocked both of them out in the knockout rounds before beating Liverpool in the final.
So saying we have that group stage, and I'll ask if you get any memories, and then we drop into the Europa League, which there's an element of many of us saying, well, actually, in an ideal world, we play Champions League football and finish third to get the money, and then we drop into the Europa League because that's more our standard. And then we go and draw Zenit St. Petersburg, obviously different at the moment with Russian teams. but they are managed by Mancini and they've got tons of money in them. So we drop out and Sod's Law get probably one of the most difficult games. We beat them 1-0 at Celtic Park, and you're thinking, we played really well, we've got a chance. And then we don't have a chance because we lose 3-0 away. So, Shane, if you get any memories of that European run through to at least we got football after Christmas principle?
Paris Saint-Germain was a sober experience home and away, and what frustrated me was that it was becoming abundantly clear that tactically, Brendan didn't have a plan B. He just, I mean, I remember you and I, Brian, used to have really heated debates on Brendan's tactical nous, and as much as my argument has always been, you don't play the same line at third park as what you would do in the Bernabeu. You've got to cut your cloth accordingly. Horses for courses. And, you know, somebody said there that Lennon was getting good results against Barcelona. Really just by parking the bus. And much, you know, from our perspective, you'd much rather have that and maybe lose 1 or 2 than go to Paris and get beat 7-1. As Robert was saying, the optics are terrible. You know, you become a bit of a joke team at that point. People begin to say, you know, Celtic's not a Champions League team. They're not even a European team to any great degree. So the frustration was that Brendan, tactically, it was very naive. He was going toe-to-toe with teams that he should never have been doing that. That was really, really naivety at its highest. Really unlucky against Bayern Munich at home. Well worth a draw in that game. The Bayern Munich away game, it was just the October school week, and I found myself in a strange position of being in Belfast, trying to find a safe place to watch the game. And I decided to get I knew a place to go, and I got a taxi. An Afghanistani taxi driver who I said to him, "Do you know where you're going?" "No." "Have you got a sat nav?" "No." Driving about Belfast, it was surreal, really, absolutely surreal experience. So that the Zenit St Petersburg thing, I think we thought we had a chance. We won 1-0, and it was one of the rare appearances of the lesser spotted Charlie Masonda. It might even have been his first game that he'd played, and I'm sure he had some. He didn't so much set the goal up, but he was involved in the set up for the goal. But again, getting into the second leg, really disappointed in Brendan. We just, mentally, we didn't look strong enough. Physically, we didn't look strong enough. And tactically, again, I'll say it again, we were very, very naive. We went out to play an open game against a team who just cut us apart. So at that point, in my mind, alarm bells are ringing about Brendan at this stage. At that level, not in Scotland, at that level.
So does anybody remember why Doris DeVries played in the 2 games against Zenit and Ebu Kouassi?
So, Craig Gordon was injured, and because we ended up signing Scott Bain on the last day of the transfer window, because actually we were going to sign the guy Carson from Motherwell.
Yeah.
He was on his way to Celtic Park, and Motherwell were going to get somebody else in on loan.
Scott Bain was going to
a backup keeper, and whoever the English team that were letting their reserve goalkeeper go, they then get an injury. So they then say to Motherwell, "You're not getting the reserve keeper," and so the Carson move to us goes off. So we then end up at the very last second signing Bain. So that's my memory of that.
And he's still there.
And he's still here.
Good luck,
Kouassi.
That was a disappointing transfer window. I mean, like, that was Compare, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. This was when suddenly we started hearing the Brendan being a bit peed off with the way that with the type of players, because we signed Hendry, Compare, and Scott Bain and Masonda on loan, and Brendan. People within Celtic are saying to me, but Brendan specifically identified Compare and Hendry, and yet publicly Brendan's saying, "Don't fancy, this is not the quality that I'm wanting." And then also somebody told me within Celtic that Compare then comes and he's in training and everybody's watching him, and it's one of these things where it's the sort of emperor's new clothes. Everybody thinks that somebody else was responsible for being the final person who puts over the line, so nobody's wanting to say to somebody else, "This guy's shite." So they're all watching him thinking, "This guy's not very good, he's got no pace, absolutely no pace at all, none at all." And they're all watching it, everybody's watching him, and it gets round that everybody then starts to think, must have been Brendan's choice. And then Brendan's apparently standing with all the coaches and turns around and says, who scouted this? Diddy is useless. And then I think the dam breaks and everybody then is spewing out about. So I think possibly within Celtic is one of these things where he becomes worse than he is. You know, it's just that because that dam breaks and everybody's then piling into the yes, he's absolutely shocking. So he then becomes worse. I think he only ever plays one game in a cup game or something like that, and never picks a ball.
My brother. So I was just going to say, my brother's lived in Germany for 40 years. He called me when we signed Marvin Compere, and he says, great signing for Celtic, you know, very experienced, very good defender. And so I was delighted to get that feedback. But, you know, he didn't even complete 90 minutes against Morton in the Scottish Cup, and that was all we saw of him. And I think he was on pretty big wages as well, coming from the Bundesliga.
So Andrew, were you hearing anything about what was coming through and why he wasn't playing?
The same kind of things as you, although you used to do off the record stuff about Hendry when Celtic had played, didn't he? I mean, Hendry was definitely his signing. He talked him up all the time. You knew he was going to go for them. He was almost kind of hinting to us that they were definitely going to go for him. That this would be a guy he would mould and make. This because he had the kind of attributes that he liked. He was tall, pretty quick, wasn't he? He wasn't. He was a ball player, I suppose, more than that kind of power that Brendan tends to favour. But that Hendry was definitely his signing all the way, because as I say, we knew it was coming because of the way he kept speaking about him.
So we have that window. We get into the league. We lose again. Second league game that Brendan loses is away at Rugby Park. I remember getting agitated because Brendan had talked so much in the sort of 2 days before the game about how he didn't like a plastic pitch that I thought. And then when the players went out, it was like they were walking. They were playing on that plastic pitch the same way I would walk about a frozen street. You know, they just were on it, and you just felt you've had it drummed into you that this is a disaster playing on this pitch, and everybody's going to get injured on it, and they played, in a dreadful way, and then Yusuf Malombo, who ended up signing and then never playing another one of those. Boyata get injured after just 10 minutes on the plastic pitch. It was just not a good game, and then we go through and eventually secure the league title with a 5-0 win over Rangers at Celtic Park. So saying, you get any memory, we had 3 draws after we lose to Kilmarnock. We lose to Kilmarnock, then have another 3 draws, then we lose to Hibs, and then secure the league against Rangers with a 5-0 victory at Celtic Park. You get any memory, Saint, of those games?
2 Rangers games, we need to talk about them, because the one that I broke that is the one that literally broke them, because they actually, by Rangers standards at that time, they played well that day, and they were giving us a lot of trouble. And also, I think we had to play Scott Bain at short notice. And I remember when I heard the team thinking, "Oh, this could be one of these days that they end well." But Celtic showed a wee bit of resilience. Brendan, to be fair to him, tactically spot on that day. He brought on Edward when Simonovic got sent off, and we went for it and we got the goal. But there's an interesting aside to that, because there's a friend of mine who's a Rangers supporter, and that was the last time that we got the full Brimlin Road stand, because after that, Rangers decided to cut the allocation. And he said to me that that way when you come out of stadium, it takes quite a long time to get down the stairs and get through the crowd. And he went into Edmondson Drive, and he walked along Edmondson Drive to where the fork comes at Paisley Road West, which is quite a distance for the stadium. It's you can still see the stadium, but it's quite a distance away. He says when I got to the fork of the road, we can still hear the Celtic fans for that distance singing after the game. This must have been about 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour after the actual game had finished. And he says you could hear them as loud as anything. He basically admitted, he goes, that's the reason why you're not getting your allocation. He says because it was getting to the stage that Rangers fans were raging at the sight of that full end, just in total celebration, because I think it was, I'm trying to do the maths here, it was something like maybe the 5th game in a row that we beat Rangers in, at Ibrox. They were actually getting draws at Celtic Park, funny enough, but they couldn't do it at Ibrox. And moving on to the Rangers home game, such a frustrating afternoon that we got to 5-0. How many minutes was it? 64 minutes?
53.
Oh,
We
it's
were
even
5-0
worse.
at 53.
And I remember thinking that day, we're really going to go to town here. But he took Rogic. Rogic was unplayable that day. And he took Rogic off. I can't remember who came on, to be honest. But Celtic just went down the gears after that. And even in the last 10 minutes, the area where I sit, everybody was shouting, go for it, get him give them a right doing. One of the, we can still name the scorers of the 7-1 team in 1957.
Yes.
That's what you were looking at here. You were going to create something that Celtic fans would be talking about 50, 60, 70 years later. And we didn't do that. And that is so frustrating.
So, Andrew, that game at Ibrox that Stephen talked about, that was another one of those ones where Brendan loses going down to 10 men because he puts a forward on and really throws the opposition. I always remember I was in the Broomloan stand. Edward comes forward, next to me just says he's going to cut inside and then hit it into the corner. And then he cuts inside, hits it into the corner. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant that day. But yeah, we then secure the title. But getting back to your point earlier, Andrew, about the number of drop points. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the last 9 games, we draw 3 and lose 2. So it was a league where we were. It was almost as if we'd put so much effort into the invincible period. It was like the hangover that Saints suffering from this morning. That we'd put so much effort into the 69 games that once it went, the players just mentally just found it difficult to take themselves up to that level again in the league.
That's what can happen. And there was a certain kind of there wasn't much change necessarily in the team, but that wasn't for the one. There was an attempt to try. He was trying to kind of recast it, the starting 11, but he wasn't succeeding. And if you remember, there was a lot of people that thought at that Christmas that Edward would be sent back to PSG because he'd made almost no impression in his early months. And they said, what's this about? Because they're never going to pay the $9 million for him. But that game at Ibrox was the kind of making of him.
Yeah.
That was probably the game that really changed it for Edward, and that's why he did become a permanent signing at the end of that season for $9.3 million. I mean, that is the Edward game. That's how people remember it, isn't it?
I
also remember it was maybe one of the last great games that Musa played for us, because he got the equaliser, the 2-2, when Brown hit the pass.
Which the keeper then?
40, 50 years, 40, 50 metres. And then there's priceless Rangers TV commentary when Fotheringham rushed out. He's going, what's the goalie doing, Tam? What's the goalie doing? But also, I thought Musa's first time pass to give Eddie space to score the winner was, when you watch that goal again, it's a brilliant counter-attack by Celtic. And I don't think we got too much out of Musa after that game. And, luckily we had Eddie ready to step in. I think the 5-0 game. The other thing about the Ibrox game, which really has to be mentioned, is that Rogic scored an absolutely sensational 1-1. A bit like his goal at Kilmarnock that had won the league. He just moves, drifts from left to right, or from right to left, hits it with a left in the top corner. Incredible goal. But and the other thing,
Magic Man does it again. He's Magic Man. As I said last week, that's what he called him, because he did.
Game was,
Magic moment.
Michael Lustig with the policeman's hat on.
Policeman's helmet. Yeah.
I don't know which one. I think it was after Forest score, maybe 3-0, and he grabs the policeman's hat. And I mean, sometimes I think Lustig was a bit of a lunatic, but he's given us plenty of things to.
He certainly was. I think I might be right in think I'm right in saying that that's James Forrest's only goal in his career against Rangers.
Against Rangers.
No,
Yeah.
he got one
Did he?
the
Was it?
following season. He scored the winner when it was Lennon against Gerrard.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The late winner.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So
yeah,
at that
from
point,
up
that was
until,
his.
yeah.
So that
That
point,
was his
that was
first
his
goal.
his first goal against Rangers. Sorry, that was his first goal against
For
Rangers.
some of the people who are not sure about Forrest, that was always the thing they pointed to.
That was
He's
always
never
the thing
scored
they
against
said.
Rangers.
He doesn't like the hurly-burly of a game against Rangers. And it has to be said, there's a certain element in that. Like, he's never really played that well at Ibrox. As I say, I've said this before in the pod about
Or
we seen
against
you've wingers.
Barisic. When you look at the amount of joy Leah Labada got against Barisic, but James Forrest didn't have that success.
I think there's two things worth mentioning actually that during that season. Stuart Armstrong and Patrick Roberts got bad injuries and were out for a long, long time. And they were during the Invincible season. They were very instrumental for Rodgers. I mean, Armstrong in terms of the energy that he gave to the midfield and the stamina, and he scored goals from the midfield. So we were losing that, and Patrick Roberts as well because I thought Paddy was a great player. He had that wonderful dribbling talent that few players have got. He could open defences up. And as much as I love James Forrest bits as well, they were two of them were very effective, but they were different types of players. I think Paddy had more technical ability, to be honest. And losing those two for such a long period, I think that was to the detriment of the team because I think Rodgers struggled to find a way of replacing them. And I think that was it for Paddy, wasn't it? I mean, but did he come back at the end of the season? I think he might come back for the last few games. But that was his loan up and he went back to Man City after that.
So we beat Rangers, we secure the title. Brendan has now won 5 out of 5 trophies, and we've got the Scottish Cup. So we've got the incredible prospect of a double treble. Like buses, you wait so long for them and then they come along. So we've got the Scottish Cup campaign saying we've got 5-0 at home to Brecon, 3-2 after the winter break, 3-2 against Partick Thistle, 3-0 against Morton, and then Scottish Cup semi-final again. I think the team that we have the most success, Brendan, that can really bang the goals in. We beat Rangers 4-0, and then again we've got Motherwell in the Scottish Cup final. So Saint, on our route to the double treble, do you have any specific memories of those games? All of them in Glasgow. I mean, that's one of the things Celtic fans complain about, the draws being rigged for Scottish Cup and League Cup. Every one of those games took place in Glasgow. We didn't play outside Glasgow in the Scottish Cup that season.
Partick Thistle put up a real good fight at Celtic Park. I think that's the game. Or was it the game? I get mixed up with the Partick and Morton games. It was really bad weather. It was the Beast for the East thing had came, and to be honest, it was touch and go if that game was going to get played. The pitch was great, but it was the surrounding areas of Glasgow. And I remember travelling to the game, and the roads were horrendous. It wasn't safe to travel. So, and then we get to the semi-final against Rangers, and it was just so academic. Rodgers just had that Indian sign over Rangers, and I think they knew that at the time. And again, one of the games that Rogic is just unplayable. He's on the top of his game. Even when Dembele went off, Celtic just kept going forward and pressing. And unusually, we get 2 penalties, which is in a game against Rangers, which is quite momentous. But in terms of the actual, I just want to make a wee point here about the double treble. Rangers in their life, the old Rangers, if you like, were very close to doing a double treble on 2 occasions. The first one was in 1979 when they played us in the 4-2 game at Celtic Park. Had they won that game and ultimately won the league, that would have been a double treble for them. And also there was I think the Dundee United final in 1994. They stood to win a double treble that day as well. So there's a lot of history for us getting into that Scottish Cup final, becoming the first team in Scotland to win the double treble, and it's quite a, as I said there, that's quite an achievement. To think that we would only win a third and then a fourth is absolutely incredible. So it's
So-
something,
so-
something to boast about.
So, Andrew, your memories of that. I mean, one of the things I didn't mention this in the desk earlier is that Liam Miller had passed away just before the Partick Thistle game. So there was a minute's silence or a minute's applause, I think, for Liam Miller, who passed away at such a young age when we played Thistle. But yes, we beat Rangers comfortably, and then we secure a double treble and get an open top bus, which is one of these things that it always used to bug me. You'd watch in England when a team won the cup and they get the open top bus tour, and there was always the attitude of, you can't be trusted in Glasgow to do that. So finally we get the open top bus tour back to celebrate the double treble. So you get any memories of that cup campaign?
I do remember it wasn't. It was a bit of a struggle. As Stephen has said about the kind of, they weren't exactly scintillating performances, the Thistle and the Morton ones. It was a bit of a kind of struggle from memory. And as Robert said, I think Morton was the one and only appearance of Comper then, eh?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Yep. And I don't think he played the full 90 minutes.
And he looked terrible. He did look terrible. That's what I remember. He thought,
He nearly gave a goal away in the first minute.
oh yeah, it just wasn't. It just wasn't at ease. I remember. I think Rogers had some way of saying he was terrible, but euphemistically. But I can't quite. I'm reaching for the words here, but I can't. It's maybe he wasn't his day. You know what I mean? There was something that was saying this guy was bloody awful, and you'll not see him again. And sure enough, and then the semi-final. I think that was the one that was Murty so distraught he wasn't allowed to speak to the press. That
Don't
It's
yeah,
when
I
there
think
was a falling out between Lee Wallace and Kenny Miller, and so not some aggro after the game about there was a fight in the Rangers dressing room or massive disagreements. Was it that game? It was around that
pretty
time,
sure.
and I think
Is that the
Lee
one?
Wallace and Kenny Miller were the two that were.
Was it Halliday
James
took it
Traynor.
off? He get taken off and he spat his dummy out. Was it Halliday? Yeah.
Could have been.
And James Traynor.
Yeah, Halliday. I'm just reading the BBC report. Andy Halliday hollering his frustration at the bench after being replaced by Josh Windus before half-time.
Yeah, so the cup semi was 2 weeks before the 5-0 game. So it was kind of sandwiched between the 3-2 win at Ibrox and the 5-0 game, the Hampden game in mid-April. Who was it?
And
One of the
Murty
penalties
was-
was a Panenka.
I think
Who
Oh
was
yeah,
it? Who did the Panenka for the
Dembele.
penalty?
Dembele.
I think it was Dembele.
Dembele.
I think it
Was
was
it in that game
Dembele.
he did it?
I'm pretty sure James Traynor was still in charge of Rangers media operation, and he refused to grant any media access to anybody from Rangers following that semi-final. Because there was nothing to say for them anymore, was there? It was just Celtic, you know what I mean, were their plaything. Celtic, as Robert says, and it was like the plaything beyond any other club in their plaything.
Well,
When it mattered, they could still show that they, as Stephen said as well, that when it came to these big games, he had that credible knack, Rogers, domestically anyway, of making
So
sure.
By the end of the season, he's now played Rangers 11 times, and he's got 9 wins
2 draws.
plus 2 draws at Parkhead,
Yeah.
which is phenomenal. And he's more or less on track.
I haven't
Second time
double
round,
checked it.
Yeah.
I haven't double checked it. I'll have to, because I remember after the 3-2 win that somebody produced a statistic, and it's right. I know it's right for Paul Le Guen, but I don't know if it's right for Kashinya, that Scott Brown has got more wins at Ibrox than 2 Rangers managers. No, I think that was the stat that was floating about. And it's certainly true of Paul Le Guen, but it could well be true of, because Kashinya's. I was the other night of his last game. The Hearts crazy 1-1 kind of draw and all that. What a crazy game that was. And that was when the Rangers supporters were really beginning to hate Steve Clark.
So
I remember also just my memory of the last league game of the season, Flag Day, and I hate it when we lose on
Yes, so do I.
Flag Day.
Yeah.
And we lost at home to Aberdeen. But there was a lot riding on the last day of the season because Rangers could have finished second if
Yep.
won at Easter Road, and I think Hibs could have finished third if they'd beaten Rangers. And it turns out that, because Aberdeen beat us at Parkhead, they finished second, and then Hibs and Rangers was a 5-5 draw, which they had an incredible game. I think Hibs were 3 up, and then Rangers were 5-3 up, and then Hibs pulled it back. Yeah,
Neil Lennon, his aeroplane, doing the aeroplane at the side of the pitch. On the pitch, on the pitch. Actually, on the pitch. But I think that's Rodgers' only defeat at that point. It was his first spell. That was his only domestic home defeat.
I mean, the funny thing about that Aberdeen game is, sorry, Andrew.
No, it was just to be honest with you. I mean, he was raging after it, mind you. That's what I remember. It wasn't this kind of, it doesn't matter, and Aberdeen have managed to finish second. He was not happy at all because he was looking for people to say, well, cup finals next week, so I really want to play myself.
But what I was going to say there was that the Aberdeen game that we lost in the last game of the season, and Hibs were drawn 5 each with Rangers. The response of the crowd that day was incredible because the game was the game was dire, to be honest. But it was what sticks in my mind is just how animated the crowd were from time to time. 1-0 for Hibs, 2-0 for Hibs, 3-0 for Hibs, and then Rangers fought back, and then at the end, when Hibs get the equaliser, it was surreal. It was wild.
I know, and it was funny. Extra surreal because there was both the away support, the Aberdeen support, and the Celtic support were cheering other, as another game was taking place. The two of them were really delighted that it was going the same way. They were wanting it to go the same way. That was the weird thing. It was like there was a kind of, the whole stadium was just kind of egging on Hibs.
So we secured a second treble. It's incredible. Motherwell Cup final, my memory is we scored 2 early goals and that's it. Game over.
Yeah.
And it's sort of coasting through.
Late goal for McGregor.
So we secured it. Yes.
Yes.
And, did they not hit the bar with a free kick towards the end?
Yes.
But apart from that, it's a double treble and a bus tour. But as you touched on, Robert, the summer that we were about to go into was the start of it was the end of the beginning of the feeling great about Brendan Rodgers era and the beginning of the end of knowing that Brendan Rodgers was going to go out the door, starting with the McGinn transfer not happening and then possibly Dembele going and all that type of chat.
Yes, I think we should have stopped singing there and then. Brendan Rodgers is here for 10 in a row.
Well, do you know, I remember getting into quite a bit of hassle that summer about stuff because I just, by coincidence, this person's telling me that and somebody else is telling me this and all these different people, and I'm pulling it all together. And I remember doing a podcast about how Brendan Rodgers is leaving, and he's definitely leaving, and giving all the story behind it because I'm taking all the information. And one of the bits was somebody in Celtic saying to me, I wish the fans would stop singing Brendan Rodgers is here for 10 in a row because he's not. So with that bombshell, I will say that's the end of the 7th in a row of the 7 of the 9 in a row, the second 9 in a row. And I will say Andrew, Robert and Stephen, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bring me sunshine in your smile.
That is the second 9 in a row Chronicles. It's out every Sunday between now and Christmas, and if you listen to this in the future, that's Christmas 2024. Thank you for the ongoing support that you provide to the Celtic Underground that enables us to continue to produce this fantastically high level of content. Once we finished with the 9 in a row Chronicles, there'll be more series that we'll be producing that will be out on a Sunday for you to listen to through the course of the week. Anyway, enough of me. Myself, St Anthony, Robert, Andrew will all be back next week for the next instalment of the second 9 in a row Chronicles.
Bring me sunshine, bring me love. Bring me sunshine in your smile. Bring me laughter
where we live, there should be more happiness.
So much joy you can give to each brand new bright tomorrow.
Make me happy through the years. Never bring me any tears. Let your arms be as warm as the sun from up above. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love, sweet love. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love.